Cheers to 4 more years of the hypocrisy that is Obama. Take a look at this, for example. On the campaign trail, President Obama said that protecting whistleblowers was essential to the foundation of democracy. Interesting, considering the fact that he's at the same time dredged up an archaic piece of legislation from World War II, the Espionage Act, and he's used it as a weapon to prosecute more whistleblowers than all previous administrations combined. So let's talk about one-on-one the Obama administration's victims. Army, Private Bradley Manning, the whistleblower who allegedly released tens of thousands of classified government documents that expose the U.S.'s war crimes. Because of those accusations, Manning has been sitting in a cold, dark cell for 2 years and 5 months. That's 897 days. Now, there have been months of pretrial hearings, and today is yet another hearing for the case leading up to an actual trial that will finally commence in February. So to talk more about this and the prospect for the case in a second term of Obama, I'm joined by Kevin Gostol, a civil liberties blogger for Fire Dog Lake. Thank you so much for coming in.
Thank you.
So what is this new update? I saw you've been live tweeting this update about Bradley Manning potentially accepting in part responsibility for what happened. Talk about this update.
So it's kind of complex in terms of like the legalese, so I'll just break it down in basic ways so that viewers can understand. And it's best to start with what it's not. He's not pleading guilty. It's not a plea bargain with the government. What happened is, in the process, you have to do a notice of plea. So you decide if you're going to plead guilty or not guilty. Well, Bradley Manning has decided that perhaps because the evidence is there that he committed the act, that he's going to generally accept responsibility for passing along information to WikiLeaks. At least that's what his lawyer, David Coombs, said in the courtroom. And what this means is that I think this is significant. It's the first time that Manning is really acknowledging in an official way that this happened. Because so far we've just had the prosecutions lobbying evidence, in the courtroom. And now it looks like he's going to, in some way, take responsibility.
How is that going to change the course of these hearings, or is it?
All right, so what's important is that he would plead to the military code offenses, potentially. And he wouldn't plead to the Espionage Act charges or a charge that he exceeded unauthorized access on his computer. And so what happens is, if the judge were to accept this as some kind of a legitimate way to move forward, then the government has to decide, do we still prosecute him for violating the Espionage Act? Do we still go after him for computer crime? And then decide what we're going to do with the trial, because that'll change the extent, how extensive it is, because you have less witnesses, you have less evidence that you have to present. It's actually easier on the prosecutors because they don't have to put all this evidence that he actually did it.
Right. And one thing that I've actually never understood about this case is I thought the legal maximum to hold someone without charges was 120 days. I mean, the time this trial commences, it'll be 1,000 days that he's been held without charges. How is this legal?
And it's good that you raised that issue, because this hearing today was about whether Manning's rights have been violated, his speedy trial rights. And the government was bringing forward witnesses. And what the government says is that it just is a process that takes a long time. Classification reviews, giving evidence over to the defense that they can use for the trial, takes a long time. It's a long bureaucratic process. Also, they're saying that, anytime you went to the court-martial convening authority, he authorized delays. He excluded the time in the period of the trial. So it's off the speedy trial clock, which is something that you can do. So it's a way to drag out the proceedings and then not have any repercussions for the prosecutors.
So it's kind of like this legal loophole where they can justify holding him, I guess, which is still outrageous. When Daniel Ellsberg released the Pentagon Papers, he was heralded as this hero, really changed the narrative. And then it seems like the narrative flipped to now we're not hailing whistleblowers as heroes, we're hailing them as criminals. We're demonizing them in the court of public opinion. Already Obama coming out saying he's guilty, has blood on his hands. I mean, why? What happened?
I have to blame the media, really. I mean, I have to blame the perception of how people see everything playing out, because I think that, take an example. I always remember this because back a few months ago, there was a soldier that went to the Los Angeles Times and provided some photos of mangled corpses in Afghanistan. And the reason why I thought this was really an incredible example of how people don't like whistleblowing on war is that everyone was saying you committed some kind of offense, like you shouldn't have told the truth. But he wasn't actually against the war. There wasn't really anything radical about what was going on. It was just pure transparency. And yet the journalists were in trouble for actually engaging in coverage. And so I just think that there's something with the culture about people really being insulated. They don't want to see the grotesqueness. They think that they should have a free pass. And the sad part is that that's going to allow for the expansion of things like drone warfare and all kinds of other wars for empire abroad that you and I might consider really bad policy.
Yeah, I mean, I thought that was really interesting, too. And they didn't even release all the photos. Was it the LA Times or something who didn't release all the photos? They said it was a matter of national security. I mean, it's just, that's the reality of war. And if you don't want to see it and acknowledge what you're doing with your tax dollars, then that's a sad state of affairs in this country. What do you think, about, I know civil liberties is your beat. You blog about it a lot. Since Obama's been such a massive failure and really continued, if not expanded, the Bush administration's surveillance state, the egregious violation of our civil liberties, what do you think about progressives who say, we just needed to get him in the second term so we didn't have to worry about re-election, and then we'll push him to the left? I mean, what do you think now the election's over? What do you see happening, Kevin?
These aren't progressive issues. That's the problem.
It is
that they don't see them as progressive issues. Libertarians really own these issues. They go out, they hit on these. Ron Paul steps up and says something about them, but you don't see progressives owning the surveillance state expansions, the war on drugs. And what that means is, what this really translates into is that, Obama had the campaign slogan, forward. So I said last night, forward surveillance state, forward with the war on drugs, forward with expanding the national security state, forward with going on with these wars for empire. I mean, they just keep going on, and it doesn't end because there is no opposition beyond the seasoned activists who are very, very necessary to the fabric of this country, but they just don't have the critical mass to have any impact on the way that things happen, the way that politicians step into Congress, and they'll make the little splashes, but it doesn't really go anywhere.
Forward with the mandate to continue all these things. Kevin Gosztola, thank you so much for coming on. Fire Dog Lake blogger, everyone check it out. Excellent blog. Appreciate your time.
Thank you.